So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Common Core standards. What they've really done is they've identified two categories of standards. The first one are these content standards. The content standards are the things, of course, that we will be very familiar with. We know that there are grade level skills and understandings proficiency that we have. Then we also have these process and proficiency standards. These are more K-12. They go throughout everything, and they deal a lot more with some of the higher level thinking and processing behind the math, behind the actual content itself. Little background history: in the year 2000, NCTM, National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, published their principles and standards for school math, where they identified these 5 areas: problem solving, reasoning and proof, connections, communication, and representation, as the things that were important in math curriculum instruction. The following year, I'm sorry, actually that same year, the National Research Council produced their text adding it up, which really identified 5 strands of mathematics, again, all intertwined, interconnected for what needs to happen in math. I like this next slide a little bit because it presents, I think, some linking of the most important things that we should be doing in our curriculum. We want to make sure that our curriculum leads students toward a conceptual understanding over here. When we have a deep comprehension of concepts, of operations, relationships, the actual content itself, that can allow kids to demonstrate their procedural fluency, their ability to make meaningful use and flexible use of procedures so they can solve whatever problem comes before them. You have this productive disposition. We want to make sure that students feel that they can do math, that they're engaged in math, and they're good at math. So you want it, but that is really an attitude that has to be generated over time. And the more confidence we can build in our kids to feel like they are able to do math, they can do the conceptual understanding and procedural fluency, they're going to develop this productive disposition. Then you have this area over here where you have mathematical practices in the center. We're going to unpack that in just a minute. But really, the two other areas the National Research Council talks about is they talk about this adaptive reasoning and strategic competence. And that's what leads to mathematical practices. Jump ahead a little bit, but the strategic competence and adaptive reasoning, strategic competence is where you have kids formulating an understanding of a problem first. They can read it, in other words, they can see whatever it is, and they can essentially understand what they need to do. That's the first step in strategic competence. The second is they can now take that and they can represent it in some way. Perhaps they need to translate it into a drawing or to a word problem or to a formula itself. And then from that, they are able to then solve that particular area. That's strategic competence, when kids can do those 3 things: understand the problem, be able to represent it in a way that they can solve it. Adaptive reasoning is their ability to think logically about a situation and then justify that logic. So those things really make up the 8 mathematical practices, which we'll talk about. When 2014 came and the Common Core standards were being adopted across the nation in each of our states, and PA adopted ours in 2014, NCTM published Principles to Action, which really is a manifesto, if you will, that ultimately gives you a gap, it helps to articulate this gap between what the standards are telling us and what needs to actually happen in practice. And so they give us some good framework for how to design an excellent mathematics program. An excellent mathematics program really blends 5 things together: effective teaching, meaningful learning, individual and collaborative experiences, making sense of mathematical ideas, and being able to reason mathematically. What they also published for us are these 8 mathematical teaching practices. And in the coming activity, you're going to take a look at these practices and understand them a little bit more. And then we also have the mathematical learning practices, which are more student specific. So these are the things that really are the important changes and trends that have led to the publication of the standards, and also why we have Principles to Action and what that actually means for us.